I'm curious, has anybody said anything about the shortened intro yet?
No one cares enough.
That's fair. But we know now who to blame.
It's all JD's fault.
We love you, JD. Just kidding.
If you're upset, the History Underground might have something to do with that.
I was going to say, honestly, it's probably not the first time JD's had to deal with some lunatic commenting on his YouTube page.
Right.
That could be its own Comedy Central bit.
I think he should do a sitcom based off of the responses. But it doesn't matter who says it, where they're from, or what video it is. It's a cut over to Archie Bunker.
Yeah.
Every time.
Every time.
You believe this?
Oh, Jesus. There's an idea.
Man, Carol O'Connor, what a guy.
Yeah.
I like that he's the complete opposite, or was the complete opposite of Archie Bunker. Anyways, we're next week on Home Brew History, the exciting life of Carol O'Connor. Alias.
Stay tuned for more. Yeah, stay tuned for more.
You can tell it's a late night episode.
That's right.
Getting a little spastic already. This is good. Right. This is good. Well, you've been good, right?
Yeah, man. Well? All is well. Summer classes have begun. And those are always fun. I'm teaching an intro to American history and a second half of Western Civ. So I know they're just, gleaming with excitement. I know.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so.
No, probably not.
Look, I try to be like the Mr. Sunshine, Mr. Optimism. It's not even cynicism that makes me think that they're not enjoying it. It's just that I know you.
I know. And it's 4 weeks too, and it's Sunday to Sunday.
Oh,
I know. They have to see my face every day, 7 days. The next 4 weeks.
I hate you
for them. I only kind of slightly feel bad.
Yeah. I mean, you know what? Actually, they'll probably listen to this episode for bonus points. So,
it wouldn't be the first time that I have to, shamelessly pump our numbers up. Yeah, I have to shamelessly pump our numbers up. And I'm like, I try to sell it to my students. I'm like, if you can't get enough of me in the class, let me tell you, you can see this.
Don't believe me. Believe me. There's a way to get too much of you.
Yes, there is.
There is. You're a bit much.
Living together for a year will do that for you.
Hey, well, we only almost killed each other once.
Only once, which is impressive considering.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Nobody came here to hear about that. They did, though, come here for a brief commercial break as we start out with a couple ads here. Home Brew History is brought to you by Civil War Trails. Civil War Trails is the world's largest outdoor museum, more than 1,500 sites, and now under new leadership, our old pal Drew Gruber has moved on to this broad sunlit uplands of oh my goodness, I can't think of the name of the parks. Oh my goodness.
He's not with the
moved on to the broad sunlit uplands of Virginia State Parks. While our good friend Chris Brown has moved into the position of executive director, we know with Chris at the helm, things are going to just keep right on moving along for Civil War Trail. So while you're out there on your next Civil War adventure, you're heading to a battlefield, maybe you're taking your summer trip off to Gettysburg or to Antietam, or maybe you're in Middle Tennessee and heading out towards Stones River, you're going to head into the Carolinas, make sure that you visit civilwartrails.org. You can find the link right down below in the video description or in the show notes on wherever you get your podcast. And order yourself a Civil War Trails map. That'll make your trip all that much more better. And while you're out there, snap a picture with a Civil War Trail sign. Use the hashtag #SignSelfie and help raise awareness about Civil War Trails. That's always such a hard one, You gotta really just
you do it well. You do it well.
But if I bore through that and I didn't bore you, you can head over to Buy Me a Coffee, where you can now subscribe to Home Brew History and help Bo and I keep on doing the thing we do. You don't want to listen to ads. You don't want to hear all this. This is your way out of it. Buy Me a Coffee. It's $5 a month. You don't have to listen to ads. The revenue that we lose from you not listening to the ads, we make up in you going over there and supporting the show. All that and much more. You'll get some kind of monthly or so newsletters. You get advance access to episodes. So if you want to hear it ad-free and you want to hear it early, that's the way to do it. And whenever we have a guest, you get exclusive access to some kind of behind-the-scenes bonus episodes, the Lanyap episodes. Our designs are by the Bearded Historian. You can visit his Etsy page, link down there in the description and in the show notes. Our good pal Jeff Williams made that logo over there in the corner, and he's making all kinds of great stuff left and right. This is the only man who, when he puts in the deposit envelope at the end of the day at any of the sites in Franklin, Tennessee, you can get a doodle. It's free Jeff Williams art. It's free Jeff arts.
Jeff
art. Farts.
Yeah.
Jeff farts. No, we don't want Jeff farts. No one wants that.
No one wants that.
No one wants those, especially the way that man eats Taco Bell. Nobody needs that. Nobody wants that. No one has any desire for that. And because we haven't ever done this before, if you're watching us on YouTube, like and subscribe. And I'm going to say it probably 50 more times throughout the course of this episode. Hey, we're talking about history, and like and subscribe. History, and like and subscribe. And tell your friends.
And stuff.
I don't care what you do. Put it on the background. I don't care if you actually watch it or not. But anyways, Bo, we got some Civil War, Reconstruction, all kinds of stuff to talk about tonight.
Chaos in the Crescent City.
It's almost like they came up with this or something.
Yeah, I like that title. Yeah, Joey brought this to my attention, and it's an event, in New Orleans history that is, well, simply put, complicated. It's complex, and there is still a lot of debate over its memory. So, Joey, where do we begin?
I guess we have to start with, what do we call it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because chaos in the Crescent City, that's nice and in vague, but like, this is an event, I guess, an incident that has really two names that it could go by. Mm-hmm. Actually, probably three.
More well known for sure.
One of them, you see it everywhere. It's the Battle of Liberty Place. Woo!
All Liberty, all in one place, right?
All there. Yeah.
All there.
The other name is the Canal Street Coup.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, the last one, the Battle of Canal Street.
Mm.
I think for purposes of our discussion tonight, we're going to stick with calling it the Canal Street Coup. We're going to come to why a little bit. But I think a little bit of background. I mean, what do you know about Liberty Place? What do you know about the Canal Street Coup?
Yeah, so I know that there are, some white radical groups like the Knights of the White Camellia, the White League, who are also heavily involved in Louisiana, but more southern post-Civil War Reconstruction violence. And that's not something that is unique to Louisiana, but we seemingly do it best. I don't know. I don't know. Louisiana does some things well, but the bad things we do well tenfold.
Yeah, we do it much better, I guess.
We
do the bad worse.
We do. And there's also one of those big, sexy names from the American Civil War that's also heavily involved in this incident, James Longstreet.
Yeah, but not on the side you expect.
All right. I know.
So I guess let's dive in. So naturally, we're talking about Louisiana. Bo and I's home state. This is the regional headquarters of Home Brew history is deep in the heart of Louisiana. But Louisiana during the Civil War occupies this it's a weird place because Louisiana is the sixth state to secede from the Union. It does so in January of 1861, leaves, and then within a year, basically, New Orleans is captured by a federal West Coast blockading squadron under the command of David Farragut. Mm-hmm. And within another year, the capital in Baton Rouge is captured, and the Mississippi River falls by 1863, and Vicksburg is captured. And really, Louisiana is kind of tied up most of the central kind of urban centers are captured. New Orleans and Baton Rouge being among them. Confederate government kind of flees into exile. And then we start to watch as Louisiana becomes like it's the testing ground, really, for later Reconstruction era policies. And I mean, this is something we see really right off the bat, is how Louisiana will be essentially Abraham Lincoln's proving ground for his plans for Reconstruction. Louisiana, Tennessee being also among them. But it is a fascinating little chapter, is this post-war period where it does just kind of seem like everything falls apart as fast as possible.
Yeah, no, and you're absolutely right. And one of the things too that, obviously Joey and I do enjoy studying the American Civil War. But what comes after it is so crucial to our development. And I'm pretty sure we've said it on this podcast. I think we were actually talking with Patrick Young about it, how we're kind of still living in some shadows of unfinished Reconstruction. And this is really only the beginning here in the Crescent City.
Yeah. And I go back to something I said in Patrick's episode, and I feel weird. We've name dropped Scott Bumpus now like 4 times on the show, but Scott even commented on the last one. He was like, wow, this is deep. And he put what I said was, we don't understand Reconstruction because we don't understand slavery. We don't understand slavery because we don't understand race. So we can't understand Reconstruction until we understand race, until we understand slavery. That's why we have such a flawed understanding of Reconstruction. Mm-hmm. This episode, the reason it gets so tied up, gets so confusing, is because it is one of the most explosive moments in Reconstruction history. Yeah. Louisiana history, yes. New Orleans history, yes. It's all kind of blended together. But I guess really you're looking for a place where our story should start. I think it's April 11th, 1865, 2 days after Robert E. Lee surrenders into Appomattox Courthouse, and 3 days before President Lincoln is shot at Ford's Theater. From the balcony of the White House, Lincoln says this: "Voters in the heretofore slave state of Louisiana have sworn allegiance to the Union, held elections, organized a state government, adopted a free state constitution, and empowering the legislature to confer elective franchise upon the colored man." And in about a sentence and a half, Lincoln just did something that no other president in the history of the country had done. He entertained the idea of black male suffrage. Now, special instances, soldiers, highly educated, all these things. But it's like the Frederick Douglass quote: Lincoln gives you the wedge and then he shoves the whole rail in. Mm-hmm. It's like this is like the kicking in of the door, or the opening of the door, and then comes the kicking in of the door. 3 days later, he's shot. 4 days later, he's dead. Easter Sunday. Good Friday, 1865. So April 14, 15. He's dead. And then as we go into the post-war period, we're under the administration of Andrew Johnson. But back in Louisiana, we have kind of the fallout of the war. So it's been under federal occupation. A new government is installed. And we start to watch as the governor administration under Governor James Wells tries to administer the state. But Wells runs into his own series of problems with a growing movement, the rebel legislature in New Orleans, because the capital had been moved from Baton Rouge to New Orleans. During the war, actually, a fire broke out in the old state capitol, which forced the capital to be relocated to the city. In New Orleans, it places itself in this kind of interesting position because not only is it the military district headquarters in the state, it's now also a seat of gubernatorial power, and it is a seat of local power. So we've got really 4 governments all running into one another, because we've also got to count in the parish government, and that becomes important a little bit later. But Wells will essentially oversee the state from 1865 to 1867. But then along comes the man, I think, of the hour in Henry C. Warmoth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Henry Clay Warmoth that I think we'll run into a couple times throughout this episode. But Warmoth is a Northerner. He was a Union officer during the war, served in the Federal Army, comes back, is elected into the State House, and becomes the governor. Warmoth has a kind of a fascinating place in all of this, because by the time we get to 1874, not only is he not the governor anymore, he's been impeached and has been effectively cast aside because he's not quite Republican enough. Because this is a period where Andrew Johnson and Abraham Lincoln, the national ticket, it's broken. We've got the radical wing of the party. We've got the more conservative or wing of the party. And all of a sudden, the Republicans that had been in power are dealing with all this infighting, and Warmoth kind of becomes a casualty of that moment.
Mm-hmm.
But a little bit before him, we have another kind of background to the background here. 1866 in New Orleans, and we're going to kind of reference some notes here, so bear with me. But Louisiana State House in 1865 boasted that it had become the rebel legislature, in that former Confederates were flocking to return to power in the state capital. Governor Wells had effectively kind of pushed through the state's kind of floundering economic status in crisis, but the legislature rallied against him. At first, what they tried to do with Wells was elect him to the U.S. Senate. But then he said he wouldn't do that. And so the second was that the rebel legislature would then try and undermine the Constitution of 1864, which had been adopted during the war by a Unionist installed kind of Republican government. This is also the same time that we see Louisiana representative in the State House, Kenner, will propose kind of the proto-black codes in Louisiana. Essentially what he says is it's targeting vagrancy and it's targeting enticement. But I'm going to use a phrase that you taught me, Bo. It's slavery with extra steps. Kenner's hope here, the rebel legislature's hope here, is to try and draw the state back to its pre-war kind of standard basis of race and racial politics and racial understanding. In New Orleans, we have a power struggle because, as I mentioned, we've got the governor's office, we've got federal offices, we've got the parish offices, and we've got the city offices. Well, a former Confederate general, those of you who will be listening to our Gettysburg series forthcoming, or have read about the Battle of Gettysburg or know about Louisiana and the Civil War, will recognize the name instantly: Confederate General Harry Hayes. Harry Hayes was elected as the Orleans Parish Sheriff, and then immediately went about trying to kind of install his friends and former soldiers into the ranks of the Orleans Sheriff's Office. But then along comes the pushback within the legislature. They decide that not only is Wells's administration unfavorable, but the Constitution of 1864 is also unfavorable. And so this kind of black-led movement within the state legislature votes to try and reconvene the 1864 Constitutional Convention, and they're going to automatically bring in some new amendments. One of them is that they would allow black male suffrage. This automatically fires up the combative ardor of the renewed, I don't know how I want to refer to him, but Mayor John T. Monroe had been the mayor of the city of New Orleans, ousted by Benjamin Butler during the occupation. Well, he's back again, and he says to Wells, he says to anyone that will listen, that he refuses to allow this meeting to take place in the city. So we've got a city official telling the state officials that they can't have a meeting of the state legislature and a state legislative body, try saying that, right, in the city. To make things even worse, Harry Hayes decides to authorize the deputization of a bunch of volunteers. Very limited law enforcement experience, but the one thing that they kind of all share in common is they're almost all former Confederate soldiers. And they're all white Democrats.
Right.
Shock.
Yeah.
So along comes the morning of July 30th, 1866. A procession is making its way to the Mechanics Institute where the convention will be held. And all of a sudden, there's pushing, there's shoving, there's a physical altercation. And then Hayes's men start to shoot into this crowd of not only legislators, but of black advocates of a new constitution. By the time it's kind of all said and done, we have 37 dead, 3 white, 34 black, 136 men wounded, 17 white, 119 black.
Wow.
And it is kind of just this bloodbath in the streets. This leads immediately to congressional attention being paid to the city. So now we've got federal authorities looking at what's happening here. And it also, as Judith K. Schaefer says, engendered the Reconstruction Acts of 1867. And this brought federal attention and federal troops back as a priority into the city, back to Louisiana. So we have a lot of things all starting to kind of barrel down. But under this Reconstruction Act, the Reconstruction Act 1867 authorizes General Philip Sheridan, military kind of governor of Louisiana, military district commander, to register eligible black men to vote because they never swore an oath to the Confederacy. And it's all kind of a judgment call. If you ever swore an oath to anyone other than the United States, you lose your right to vote. So now we have this emergence of the enfranchised and the disenfranchised and the formerly disenfranchised and now the newly disenfranchised. This is why I call it the world's worst gumbo pot.
Yes, I love that. And you know, Joey's absolutely right. I totally agree that this is arguably an ingredients list that probably don't make a good gumbo. It's kind of like putting tomatoes and which honestly, if you put tomatoes, corn, quinoa, if you put any of that in there, seek God, seek help, or seek John Foltz. He'll help you out. But Joey, what does this ingredients list of a terrible gumbo look like?
Well, kind of mentioned, we've got the federal government, the state government, the city government, the parish government, all living and breathing in the same place. Kind of like you and I living together, right? But make it much worse. Now we also have white Northerners, the carpetbaggers, we'll put that in quotes. We also have the scalawags, white Southerners who have now tied themselves to the Republican Party into Reconstruction era policies. We have the free people of color of New Orleans, and we have the formerly enslaved population now free. Problem is that the two of those groups even have political and social infighting because the free people of color now realize that they're going to be denied any of the rights and privileges that they had enjoyed because they're no longer a specialized category from the formerly enslaved. They're just now all black and all white. Make that even worse. We have a lot of former Confederate soldiers returning to the city. So we just kind of keep blending all this up. We've got former planters, we've got former businessmen, former mercantile businessmen, and former city and public administrators who don't have jobs anymore. And we have a lot of very, very wealthy, very, very powerful people, all living within the city and all fomenting their own civic strife. So why is it the world's worst gumbo pot? Well, imagine all of these people living in the same town, and then you tell half of them that they can't vote anymore.
Right.
They can't hold office anymore.
And so I think that's a perfect segue into this question that I have to ask, because we we've been talking about rival governments, right? And obviously, in Louisiana, would struggle to have one functioning government, which, functioning government, sort of an oxymoron. Yeah, we get that. Pick all the low hanging fruit that you can. But still, the existence of these rival governments, how did that affect the people of New Orleans? And to kind of make this a two-parter too, was the Civil War over politically for the Crescent City?
So let's jump ahead a little bit. The rival government that gets set up comes as a result of the election of 1872, where we see, let's see, can I do this? Am I going to be able to do this? I might be able to do this. Governor William Pitt Kellogg, candidate William Pitt Kellogg against candidate John McHenry. John McHenry is a Democrat, or what they're calling a Democrat fusionist. This is a kind of a blend of largely white Democrats and former Whigs, not necessarily loyal to the Union, but acting kind of as agents between former Confederates and state government. And then there's Kellogg, who is a Republican. And when he runs in 1872, I think he gets something like 72,000 votes compared to McHenry's 55,000.
So pretty clear cut here.
Pretty clear cut, but the election is immediately disputed. There's claims of voter fraud, of election fraud, of electioneering, of stolen ballots, of political intimidation. So kind of nothing's changed, right?
Well, I hate to do that, but ask my wife about the emails that she gets.
Right.
Almost every single day. People still claiming that to be true.
And now we have to go back to this guy. Remember, I said we'd come back to Henry Clay Warmoth a couple times. So Warmoth is impeached at the end of his term, the 72 going into 73. He is ousted, but he refuses to back Kellogg, the other Republican. In fact, he throws his support behind McHenry, and because he controls the state's returning board, he says McHenry won the election. So McHenry installs himself as a governor, and Kellogg installs himself as a governor. Each of them have their own lieutenant governors, in Davidson Penn for McHenry, and in C.C. Antoine for Kellogg. But in the interim, Warmoth is gone. Goes up to New York, he's in New England, and he's replaced for 35 days by Pinckney PBS Pinchback, who holds the title at that point as the only black governor in the Reconstruction era South, only black governor in the history of the state of Louisiana. He only holds the office for 35 days. He's essentially a little stopgap measure. Make sure that there's someone there. But then we're thrown into constitutional and political turmoil as McHenry and Kellogg both make claims to the governorship. So we've got two functioning governments. Both set themselves up, but Kellogg gets the backing from the federal government, gets the backing from Grant, from the Grant administration, because now Johnson's out and Grant is in. Kellogg starts to try and prepare his government and the state for potential political violence, because it's already brewing. We're already seeing a lot of telltale signs. 1866 was a pretty clear message. The political violence that surrounded the election of 1872 is pretty clear. But now along comes his election, and then we get to 1874. But Kellogg and McHenry both competing, right? We've got this kind of fight to the death between the two. So I guess if you're in New Orleans, you start picking sides, because not only do you have McHenry and Kellogg to pick from, but even within Kellogg's administration, you have Republican loyalists and party loyalists, and then you have the Customs House faction, which is born effectively out of New Orleans and might not necessarily agree with everything that Kellogg does, but it'll at least back him when politically convenient. The one contribution, maybe, that Henry Clay Warmoth makes in his governorship, his gubernatorial reign, is that he allows for the establishment of a Louisiana state militia. And he places that militia under a very, very interesting choice in General James Longstreet, the former Confederate general, which might seem odd, but after the war, Longstreet had effectively abandoned the Confederacy, the Confederate cause, and had decided to become a Republican. And it goes back to a few different things. Chief among them is that he was friends with Ulysses S. Grant, and looking for a patronage position within the Grant administration. But Longstreet, post-war, makes his way to New Orleans, gets involved in the Cotton Exchange with another former Confederate, William Miller Owen. So those familiar maybe with Louisiana's premier field artillery unit in the Confederate Army, the Washington Artillery, would know the name William Miller Owen. First rights in camp and battle, which is kind of first-hand account of the battalion's actions throughout the war. But we've got this influx of former Confederates, and Longstreet becomes this kind of the symbol of the reconstructed rebel. But Longstreet says it best. To me, the surrender of my sword was my reconstruction. I looked upon the lost cause as a cause totally, irrevocably lost.
You know, if only he could say that louder for the people in the back.
Well, he tried, and they ran him out on a rail for it, but we're getting to that. We're getting to that.
Yeah, fair. Sorry, putting cart before horse here.
So does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I feel like that was a long-winded way to get to it. But.
No, but I think it's necessary, especially in this era of history. I think a lot of people are, sort of ignorant of it, because especially in, I've seen people sort of go, especially if you're teaching, history classes, like for instance, for me, I do my best. I start my second half of my American history courses with a Reconstruction lecture, and I end my 201 class with the same lecture. And the reason I do that is because I find that a lot of people stop at the American Civil War and then pick up with the Compromise of 1877. I'm like, guys, you realize that stuff is happening between 1865 and 1877, and they're absolutely crucial. And this is one of those events. So no, you're absolutely right.
So I think now we kind of have to introduce the two factions that get involved, because I think we're at the point now where we're ready to start talking about what happens on September 14th, 1874. So again, a little bit of background. In Opelousas in 1874, the newest thing in white paramilitary organizations is born. The new hip one is the White League. Mm-hmm. Effectively, they're like political social clubs that become militant. So you might have something like the Grant Parish Political Club. Well, then it all of a sudden becomes the Grant Parish White League. There is, the Crescent City Political Society, Crescent City Political Club becomes the Crescent City White League. They kind of rebrand themselves. And they identify themselves as the white man's party. But really what they fear most of all, because fear is what drives this, they fear the loss of state control to black rule. Mm-hmm. That really is kind of the basis of it. And in their platform, they say that they are meant to defend the hereditary civilization and Christianity menaced by stupid Africanization.
They didn't mince words there.
No, they kind of jump right on to the point. I mean, that's the thing with so much of this stuff is like, why did the Confederate States secede? Well, they didn't mince words, my guy. Like, they said it.
Yeah.
Here it is, the White League. They said it. So then we see two incidents that take place: 1873 with the Colfax Massacre, and then 1874 with the massacre at Coushatta. Then that takes us back to New Orleans. And what starts to happen throughout the year, as we kind of trifle our way through 1874, we start to watch as the White League begins to arm themselves. And then to make things even worse, not only are they arming themselves, but they're actively dressing in military uniforms and parading through the streets of the city. And they're marching and they're doing close order drills and they're doing kind of all of the things that you might suspect someone capable of carrying out a coup d'etat would do.
Yeah.
Same time that we have the Crescent City White League is kind of formed up, they very, very quickly become kind of build a reputation for themselves, becoming the best trained and the best equipped. They also kind of pioneer an idea of putting in a military rank structure. So you've got a commanding general, you've got lieutenants, you've got chieftains, and then down every rank all the way from sergeants all the way down to privates. And they build this rank structure out. So we start to see a real military-like kind of atmosphere come along from the military culture that comes along from them. Politically, they're loyal to McHenry. They become this kind of an armed militia dedicated to trying to install John C. McHenry and Davidson Penn to the governor's office.
And again, it's like, people would ask, I wonder why. It's like, well, clearly we know why.
Yeah, and that's going to be a big piece of my boohickey because there's some things I got to say.
Hey, we're always looking here to debunk bad history.
They're led by Frederick Nash Ogden, Fred Ogden. He had been a Confederate officer through the war, commanded at one point an artillery unit, then a cavalry unit. But he is both president and commanding officer of the Crescent City White League. On the other side of the coin, we have the Louisiana State Militia, which was authorized back under the administration of Henry Clay Warmoth and kind of overseen and organized by James Longstreet. And within that, we also have the Metropolitan Police Force. They're two separate entities, but so many times they kind of get grouped together and thrown together when we talk about these things. But they do need to be remembered as two things that kind of act as one, but we'll come to that. So the Louisiana State Militia, as I mentioned, comes under Warmoth. That's back in 1871. They're rooted in New Orleans. Although the hope had been to expand them across the state, there's kind of just not a lot of interest that ever really comes about because it's a volunteer service. Now, why aren't people jumping to join the state militia? There's no stability in the pay. So today, if you work for a state agency or government agency, or you're in the military, you're going to get paid regardless. The state militia's pay was only given to the soldiers when they were activated. But if you're activated, that means you're at training or you're actually active in the field. But the legislature would only authorize you to pay them when they were being trained and in the field. So if you go and you train, you get paid. So how does the legislature get past this? How does the State House get past this? They decide to say that they don't have the budget. Don't have the budget to do it. You can't do it. So then you can't train. So then you're kind of on a back foot and you're ill-equipped and you're ill-prepared for when problems start. I wonder why that was almost like it was intentionally done. But again, rooted in New Orleans, but its leadership, its organization, I think is really interesting. I'm also a giant nerd, and a lot of these names kind of like jumped off the page at me because, I know that guy.
Yeah.
I know that one.
I do that all the time.
So not only do you have James Longstreet in command in 1870-71, but it's divided into two divisions. The first one is under Major General Hugh Campbell, who commands the 1st Division. But under him, and this is where I was like, oh my gosh, what a cool connection. The 1st Brigade is commanded by A.P. Penn Mason. Penn Mason had been on Robert E. Lee's staff in the Army of Northern Virginia, then under Longstreet. But in November of 1864, do you know where Penn Mason was?
I'm imagining he's in Franklin.
Sure is. He's on John Bell Hood's staff.
How about that?
So I was like, I know Penn Mason. That's a fun name. And then after him, second command's commanded by General A.E. Barber. There's a bunch of smaller kind of recognizable names that get tossed into there, William Miller Owen being among them. We'll see him involved. We'll also see Henry Street involved. So a lot of names that Civil War enthusiasts would be interested to see and would be excited to see. I don't know. But this brings up the question: is the state militia, as the White League called it, the Negro militia? Mm-hmm. Because they just named a whole slew of former Confederates and white guys who were ranking members of the state militia. Now, there are black companies. The Metropolitan Police Force has black officers, but again, they're two different things operating at the same time. The creed of the Louisiana State Militia is administered by Longstreet. He effectively says, you're loyal to the state government. You're loyal to the government that is in place now. Equipment-wise, training-wise, like we talked about, poorly funded. Thus, it takes forever for them to get uniforms. The weapons aren't that great. So how do you intervene on that? Longstreet puts out a call to his friends in Washington, D.C., a call to General, now President Ulysses S. Grant, and tries to get federal grant money to buy weapons and stores for these men. So they get old, outdated Army Enfields. Then some of the wealthier companies, they get to carry around a brand new repeating rifle in Winchester. So we've got now some more well-armed guys, some kind of halfway decently well-armed guys. So we've got them. Same time, we've also got 1868, the formation of the Metropolitan Police Force. It's racially integrated. So by 1870, of the 650 officers that were in the ranks of the Metropolitans, 182 of them were African American. Wow. And they're under the command of Algernon S. Badger. They become kind of like the nucleus of the state militia in New Orleans. So all the other companies kind of form around them. They're consolidated under Kellogg and Kellogg's new adjutant general and Henry Street in 1873. And Street gives Longstreet command of the 1st Division. That means that in New Orleans, in September, James Longstreet has tactical command of a integrated militia police force against a band of white former Confederate radicals.
How the turns have tabled?
I mean, it really does kind of beggar belief. I mean, like, it's just, I don't know.
James Longstreet said, dang it. Hang on, this is so worth it.
Yeah, buddy. This is, yeah.
That's exactly what you're going to say.
Glad to see it.
Thank you.
So New Orleans by 1874 kind of becomes like the last refuge for Republicans, because what's happened over the last couple of years is the White League has kind of swept across the state and eliminated Republican opposition. Mm-hmm. They've done this through political violence. They've done this through intimidation tactics. They've simply shown up and said, if you're a Republican and you're still in your office tomorrow, we'll kill you.
Yeah.
And what they noticed is that very quickly, those offices were vacated.
As one can imagine.
So Republican power kind of falls apart very, very quickly. In New Orleans, Governor Kellogg effectively is kind of on an island. This is a sort of last remaining Republican in power within the state, and the last influential Republican in the state. Earlier in the day, on September the 13th, 1874, there was a rally that took place at the base of the Henry Clay statue on Canal Street. The rally started about mid-morning, and by 2 o'clock had kind of broken up with chants of "Hang Kellogg." Kellogg is declared as a usurper of the government, and this rally finishes with a call that says, declare that you are of right and ought to be and mean to be free. Well, where does that come from? That's a kind of spirited imagining and this kind of want to tie yourself to the American Revolution. They see themselves as revolutionaries. So they leave the Henry Clay Monument. These men go home. They grab guns. They grab weapons. They grab bats and batons, whatever they can, and they come back. 4 o'clock in the afternoon, some 8,300, 8,400 men are assembled right near the foot of Canal Street as it gets to the river. Governor Kellogg leaves the State House, then the St. Louis Hotel, and takes shelter at the Customs House because he knows full well that if the White League attacks the Custom House, they're attacking a federal property, and that's not good either. That'll bring in the federal government and U.S. Army troops in the intervention. There's already federal troops making their way to the city. Calls have already been put out. But in the meantime, we're going to have to rely on the Metropolitans and the state militia. Longstreet and Badger get to the field, if we'll call it that, get into the downtown area, and they start to make their deployments. What Longstreet kind of envisions is that Badger and the Metropolitans will drive these men back against the river and pin them into an area, and very, very quickly they could de-escalate the situation, or if they want to give battle, because not only are the Metropolitans well trained and uniformed, they also have a battery of artillery supported by 2 Gatling guns. So, if you want to dance, they're not the best partners.
No.
The Metropolitans move into position, and the White League very, very quickly adapts to that. They take off moving back towards the river. They kind of form this 90-degree angle, and all of a sudden the Metropolitans, as they start to advance with this kind of a scouting party to see what lies ahead, they start to take fire, and then the gun battle erupts. This entire battle, let's put it in quotes, street battle, maybe takes 20 minutes. Maybe. The Metropolitans are routed. They take out off the field. As the state militia sees that, they take off. In the middle of all of this, Badger is wounded. James Longstreet, actually out on horseback, trying to order his men across the field, is thrown from his horse and injures the exact same place in his shoulder where he had been wounded during the Battle of the Wilderness during the war. So he is kind of removed from the field. And there's later speculation about his conduct of the battle and everything. Let's not even get into that. Longstreet is where he's supposed to be, trying to bring about order to this rout that's ongoing. These men take shelter in the State House. They take shelter near the Customs House. And by the time it's all over, Ogden could pretty easily say that he's won the day. In fact, he does. The coup succeeds, and Lieutenant Governor of the Rump government, Davidson Penn, decides that he is now the new governor of the state of Louisiana because John McHenry is out of town. So if McHenry's gone and Kellogg is a usurper, well, clearly he's the guy. So Penn installs himself as the governor. Now, he only gets to rule over his stolen kingdom. I love that. He ruled his stolen kingdom for 3 days before William H. Emory shows up with the United States Army, and the White League realizes that they can't take on the army, and they surrender. Kellogg gets to go back to office, becomes the governor again, as though he had never really lost the position. But what it proves to the White League and to people across the state is that Kellogg's administration and Republican administration can only be maintained through the use of federal brute force. This really keys the end of Reconstruction in Louisiana. It's going to take another 2.5 and 3 years, but Kellogg's ability, in fact, anyone's ability to do anything, carry out any Reconstruction policy in the state is severely hampered. And you can look at this moment and Colfax and Coushatta and the White League riots and uprisings across the state in Opelousas. It all comes back to what unfolds in New Orleans.
Yeah, and this is not a lesson that was unlearned to them, and that's why we have such a complicated understanding of Reconstruction, is because there's a lot of complication. But this is only a brief glimpse into Southern violence in the post-war era. And
I really
again,
feel like this should be like a 5-part series.
I think anything that we do, we could stretch out to 5 episodes.
Yeah.
But
just think about the fallout from this, man.
Yeah.
I mean, in within 3 years, the Metropolitan Police Force effectively doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
The Louisiana State Militia that Warmoth created is done away with. And you know what becomes the new state militia? In fact, lays the foundations for the National Guard in the state? The White League.
That's crazy, isn't it?
I mean, just nuts. And you get somebody like James Longstreet, who's run out on a rail. Longstreet, though, in September 24th, 1874, so not one to let this slide. This is only 10 days later. Gives an interview for the Indianapolis Journal. And Longstreet says, "My opinion is that the only true solution for Southern troubles is for the people to cordially accept and in good faith all the results of the war, including the Reconstruction measures, acts of Congress, Negro suffrage, etc., and live up to them like men."
Yeah, and after this, because like you said, after this, Longstreet's out of here. He's like, you know what? The hell with this.
He has no choice. I mean, he's constantly being attacked, constantly being threatened, and he finds himself increasingly on an island. But the crazy thing is, I don't think Longstreet's alone. We talked about all the other former Confederate officers that are part of the Metros and part of the state militia. But then what about the quiet ones that aren't? They might have the same political leanings that Longstreet did. It's a lot easier to not say anything when you see what they're doing to him.
True.
So Longstreet goes to Gainesville and, lives out a very long life.
He lives a long street-like life.
He lives a long street life.
Yes.
But he also gets run over the rails in history. I mean, we've talked about this a million times. It's like, who becomes the Confederate scapegoat for everything that happens at Gettysburg? It's Longstreet. Yeah. Who's to blame for Confederate defeat? Well, Longstreet.
Mm-hmm.
He becomes kind of like the martyr then, and the whipping boy for Jubal Early and the Southern Historical Papers and the post-war Confederate memory that gets constructed. They need someone to blame. Well, who better?
Yeah, and it's easier to blame all the eggs in one basket, than to discuss the nuance of this is a group effort of failure. Yeah. So, Joey, let me ask you this, and I know we're kind of wrapping up here, is what should the legacy of this be? What can we learn from it?
I think in the immediate days and weeks and months after, the effects maybe weren't necessarily known, but within a couple of years, you could see that Reconstruction was coming to an end. I mean, 1876, we get the stolen election, right? We always use those things in quotes. The contested election, 1876. So Rutherford Hayes gets the presidency, kind of on the condition that he ends Reconstruction with the Compromise of 1877. And then in Louisiana, Francis T. Nichols, former Confederate officer, becomes the governor of the state, kind of through some political maneuvering. And by the time we get to the end of Reconstruction, we have to ask ourselves, why did it fail? How did it fail? Who let it fail? I mean, like you said, it's a team effort, a group effort in letting it fail. But I always like what, and we've had David Stumpfel on the show. David talked to us about Lyndon Johnson, but David and I used to sit together and just talk about Reconstruction all day long. It's a fun one to just sit there and listen to him, who maybe has spent more time learning and reading and writing about Reconstruction than anyone else I know, David just kind of simply said, like, Reconstruction only failed because we let it.
Yeah.
As a nation, we just decided we were tired. The Panic of 1873 didn't help things, but we were tired. We were economically stretched, and we were just ready to move on. Not in the sense of like, let bygones be bygones. Oh, hey, don't do that again. We're watching. We'll fix you up again. But it was just, it felt like it was time. It had been long enough. How do you convince someone in Akron, Ohio that they need to care what's going on in Athens, Georgia? It's really hard.
Yeah.
So Reconstruction ends within just a few years. White rule is restored. And I mean, if you just look at Louisiana, I thought this was an incredible kind of fact. Charles E. Nash was sent to the U.S. House of Representatives in 1875.
Mm-hmm.
He ousted in 1876. And from 1876 to 1991, no other black man ever represented the state of Louisiana in the U.S. House of Representatives. It took until 1991.
For those who are bad at math, that's 115 years, by the way.
Yeah. So we see Jim Crow-ism really born. I mean, you think about Plessy versus Ferguson. I mean, that comes right out of the city of New Orleans.
Yeah.
But, all that aside, in November of 1882, the City Council of New Orleans decides to erect a monument to the heroes of the Battle of Liberty Place, the White League.
Mm-hmm.
And that in 1882 was proposed, and it doesn't get erected until 1891. Now, what I thought was really kind of fascinating, and I know it's 57 minutes and people are going, oh God, when are they going to stop talking about what was fascinating? What I thought was really interesting about this, though, is 1891, you know how they were able to close the gap on the funding?
Mm.
What else happened in New Orleans right around the same time frame? They hanged 11 Italians after the murder of the police chief Hennessy.
That's true, didn't they?
And they basically kind of used the lynching of the Italians to say, like, this is a monument to white supremacy, to white rule, to white men, not black men, not Italians. And like, they got a little financial shot in the arm from that marketing pitch.
Like that's something.
And so they paid for, had a 30-foot monument obelisk put up. But I mean, this thing, let's just look through the dates. Here's just the dates of every year that some incident occurred revolving around that monument.
Mm-hmm.
1891, its erection. Okay. 1965, 1970, 1974, again in 1976, 1981, 1989, 1993, 2004, 2012, 2015, 2017.
I'm telling you, it's one of those things that still is hotly talked about, even still today. And obviously the whole monuments movement, obviously it took its hold and around the same time, 2016, 17.
Mm-hmm.
So it's no shock that this one came up for debate, obviously.
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about it. In 1932, mm-hmm. they go ahead and they add a little inscription to it. In 1932, the inscription effectively says, this is being put up to show a monument to white rule and to white supremacy. Okay. Then in the 1960s, 1974, the city of New Orleans adds another plaque to it. They say, although the Battle of Liberty Place and this monument are important parts of New Orleans history, the sentiments in favor of white supremacy expressed thereon are contrary to the philosophy and beliefs of present-day New Orleans. So then just a few years later, 1981, Mayor Ernest Morial calls for its removal, manages to kind of ride that out. 1989, it actually is removed for some work and restoration. 1993, it's relocated from the foot of Canal Street to One Canal Place, a little bit closer to the river, kind of tucked away. And then in 1993, same time frame, another inscription is added. It says, "In honor of those Americans on both sides who died in the Battle of Liberty Place, a conflict of the past that should teach us lessons for the future."
That's kind of like putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. It doesn't help that much.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, the 1932 inscription says the United States troops took over the state government and reinstated the usurpers, but the national election of 1876 recognized white supremacy and gave us our state.
Again, they're not really mincing words here.
Yeah. So the monument in 2017 was taken down by the city. And, you know, you can argue about monuments and history and all these things and whatever, right? I mean, like, if there's one, maybe that just should.
That's the one.
Right? It's that one. I think we close with this, though. You want to close with this one? I think this is a good one to end us on. I love the way that Elizabeth Varyn ended her book on Longstreet. And I think Longstreet is the perfect way to end. You know, there he is. So Longstreet mused in 1880. That goes back to his quote, right? "To me, surrender of my sword was my reconstruction. I looked upon the lost cause as totally irrevocably lost." So Longstreet mused in 1880, capturing why he has been the most embattled military figure from America's Civil War. We like to bestow praise on historical figures who had the courage of their convictions. Longstreet's story is a reminder that the arc of history is sometimes bent by those who had the courage to change their convictions. He accepted defeat with a measure of grace and tried to learn and then to teach the past's lessons. And for that, he commands our attention as one of the most enduringly relevant voices in American history. I think you can make the same argument about Reconstruction.
Yeah.
Is that it's been kind of this embattled, this controversial, this doohickey-filled period in our time. And yet it might be the one that can teach us the most. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And, you know, obviously before we go, you did mention that word and you wanted to spell something here. So, Joey, what exactly do you want to debunk about this issue?
Well, one of the things that is maybe kind of tied directly to the Canal Street Coup or the Battle of Liberty Place, whatever you want to call it, is the idea that it was about removing a usurper government or reinstalling the democratically elected government. The part about that, though, is that it removes the racial politics of it completely from the discussion. You don't get the Battle of Liberty Place or the Canal Street Coup without the installation of black legislation and black legislators in the State House, without the rise of political figures like PBS Pinchback and Oscar Dunn, and you don't get that without the integration of police forces like the Metropolitans. So what's the boohickey is that it's not just about politics. It's not just about a usurper government. There's no claim to a spirit of revolution. There's no claim to the spirit of 1776. It's about race.
Yeah.
It's about trying to restore white rule, this time through violent means.
And let us be clear, we are not putting our 21st century lenses on here. We have clearly we've clearly given you excerpts, you know, from the time period, you know, so the words speak for themselves.
I like to think.
Yeah, they do.
I'm sure the comment section on this one's still going to be a hoot.
I hope so. I mean, again, it wasn't that long ago that I pissed off Confederate Twitter, which exists, so that's weird.
But Twitter doesn't anymore. So that's
weird world we're living in. But goodness gracious, what is in my cup? Well, again, I am still watching my caloric intake, at least for the next 2 months or so, before we go to the beach, and then no holds barred because it's vacation. Right. So I have some coconut rum with some zero sugar cran apple juice. It has been perfect. It tastes beachy. How about you, Joey?
Ready to be disappointed?
Yes.
I have hot tea in 1 cup, but it's not caffeinated tea. In fact, it is a cinnamon horchata chamomile.
Oh,
it sounds like it shouldn't be good, but it is very good, and it makes you very sleepy.
Yeah, chamomile is the sleepiest tea.
And then in the other cup, I have my dessert from earlier, which was inviting someone into my diet here. And then there's blueberries, strawberries, oat milk, and peanut butter powder all blended up, and it's just piece de resistance. Yeah, that's how I ran that 9-minute 47-second mile.
By the power of berries and peanut butter power.
That's it. I run on peanut butter power. That's all I have. That's all I can offer you. So there we go. There's homebrew history.
We hope you learned a little something. I know I surely did. There's a couple of things I was not too familiar with, but now I am. Thank you, Joey. That's a great presentation. And I know that you're giving this lecture at some other time. So
a couple times.
Yeah. Well,
couple more times.
When you do something well, it's not unlikely that people are going to ask you to do it multiple times.
Sometimes I wish they wouldn't. Anyways, if you like the episode, remember, like and subscribe. I'm going to say it one more time. Like and subscribe.
Don't do one or the other. Do both.
Yeah, do both, and then share this one with your friends and go, oh, hey, I didn't know about this, and this is great, and I learned some things. That's always good too. Leave us your feedback, leave us your questions, leave us your comments down below. Whatever. Just be nice. That's all. That's all we ask. Well, always a pleasure.
Always.
Everybody out there on the airwaves listening or on YouTube, we'll catch you next time.
We love you, and we'll see you then.
Yeah. Well, yeah.